Welcome, everybody, to the Adam Nitti podcast. I am your host, of course, Adam Nitti. And boy, I've got a treat for you today because one of my favorite people in the world, not only in the music world, but just in the hang friend relational world, comedic world, is my buddy Kirk Covington. Kirk is coming to it from the West Coast today. Kirk is you have dual residency in both LA and Austin.
I truly do.
Texas.
I truly do.
That's incredible.
So, while I'm young enough to enjoy it,
man, amen to that. And it's awesome to have you here. And I haven't seen you in real world forever. We're forced to deal with the virtual right now. I wish you were here at the house hanging out. But we got to start at the beginning, man, because where I first heard Kirk, everybody, was playing with a little band called Tribal Tech, which all of you instrumental fusion heads know. Scott Henderson, Gary Willis, Kirk Covington. You guys were the nucleus, right? Is that safe to say?
Well, a better way to put it is that Willis got out here before me, after North Texas. Him and Henderson had hooked up. They did the early records with the cats at school, basically Houghton and Brad, and then when Kinsey graduated Berkeley in 1990, I believe, God, a long time ago, that was really where we kind of formed a band that stayed together for almost 23 some odd years.
But you started as a trio, is that right?
No, we the first jam was a trio, and then I was there for a few keyboard auditions. Some great cats, and then they got a cassette tape from Kinsey. He was still in Boston, and as a matter of fact, he had the Wave Station, it's still one of my favorite old axes, and he just had his vibe. His vibe was all over the place. You could tell that he was, to me, obviously the right cat for that kind of thing. And then
Scott Kinsey, the keyboard player, for those of you out there who aren't familiar with him, the virtuoso.
And basically, I'd say we started at the same time because we went out on tour with that quartet that same spring. We actually rehearsed the very first time in my house in Burbank. And, 23 years later, we had done a lot of stuff. So
wow, that's incredible.
That's the band. That's the core band because we went through so many machinations of everybody's heavy, thorough composed music, freaky fusion. Then we went through a entire phase, including records, Thick and Rocket Science, where we got to a point where I think especially those two guys, the band leaders, were kind of sick of composing.
Yeah.
Those guys have 70 or 80 published tunes between them just in Tribal Tech.
Wow.
And we just started jamming because we were, me and Willis were always jam-based. Kinsey is an uber jammer.
Yeah.
Scott loves to jam. So we just got to a place where and just to close that point, I always felt like the best idea is always a balance. Like my favorite gigs, we had one gig in Seattle I'll never forget. And really during the height of the grunge era, 97, 98, packed house, blah, 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 real cool. And we played one song in two shows. And it also happened to be one of those superlative jam nights where everything's on. Sometimes your cojones are out in the street getting run over by a steamroller. You're going, I got nothing. I can't contribute. I can't launch. I can't come up with cool grooves. And everybody in the band is feeling the same way.
Yeah.
So you sound like crap. But that's the risk reward of jamming.
Yeah.
You and me and Whitaker up in that guy's second floor studio that time.
Oh, yeah.
Superlative jamming over at Whitaker's studio. We've had our crowning moments, but that's the risk of jamming versus when you're writing music, it's sort of your wellspring and you bring it to everybody and hopefully everybody contributes, but it's not that much different than classical music in some ways. Beethoven writes his cool shit and everybody has to play it. Of course, they don't get to jam and do what modern music players do, but it's basically the same vibe. When you jam, it's a truly improvisational, collective, hippie, organic commune.
Yeah.
everybody's growing the vegetables.
I think my favorite thing of all about tribal tech, and I know this is a sort of common theme in terms of attraction and affinity from people who love to play and are trying to better themselves. What you all were doing was you went beyond the, sort of like the jazzer mentality and, swinging all the time. And, it was like taking the most intense aspects of jazz harmonic structure and combining it with the attitude, the tones, and the unrelenting energy of rock and roll. And that, to me, that was the magic bullet. It was incredible.
Exactly the same for me. And there was no way to help it because everybody grew up in that era. In 1968, I was in 8th grade and I had an older brother, guitar player, Kyle. And I had parents who loved pretty much inside jazz. Everybody in the family sang in choir. The point is, I couldn't help but be a rock and roller. That's what I was.
Yeah.
I really always say that I acquired jazz pedagogy. I had acquired jazz understanding, but I was born playing rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have it any other way because to me, the real Elvin Jones, heavy Tony Williams jazz guys and the John Bonhams and the Mitch Mitchells, they all had the same thing, especially from the drum chair. They all had the same energy and the same vibe, regardless of what they were playing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one of the hippest things about that band is that we were seriously funky and we were seriously rock guys, you know. Henderson. I mean, subsequent Scott Henderson solo projects were all about hardcore blues rock fusion.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of went on their solo things. I think everybody kind of went back to their deal. Kenzie went, went where he goes. Willis was funky as hell on his solo things and all about that and 3/4. And now, as you have, I finally pursued my solo interest, and my solo interest have vocals.
Yeah.
Have rock tunes, they have, so, and that's, to me, that's the normal path, is that if you're lucky enough to be in a great ensemble, eventually everybody needs to do their own thing. And occasionally we get back together like we did on that last tour. But, that's, I agree wholeheartedly. That's one of the hippest things about the band, beyond the composition, beyond the individual playmanship, is the fact that we were funky rock jazz guys.
Yeah.
Fission. I call it fission, not
Fission.
fusion.
Nice. I'm so glad.
Nobody plays fission, man.
Nobody plays fission like you play fission.
Nobody plays fission.
Sure. Whenever I've seen you play, it's regardless if I've played with you or watching you in another context, I always say the same thing. You play every show like it's your last show on earth. And I am so inspired by that. And I'm so jealous of that too, because there are some nights that I just don't feel on. And it's really hard to bring the energy. And I got to know, man, that positive energy that you bring to the stage, you're smiling at everybody, you got eye contact with everybody. How in the heck do you do that every show after show? If there's, no matter the size of the audience, man, it's nothing short of inspirational. Where does that come from?
The two short answers. Number one is always holding dear to the fact that it's a gift and a blessed thing to be able to play and enjoy music. It's the joy factor. It's the factor that we're getting to do something that most people never even get to realize or experience, because it's one of the divine arts. And they really are divine. I was made that way. And based on that belief that it's a gift, and that I have to be a steward of that gift. And I would say number two, this is a dual answer. I'm from Midland, Texas. There wasn't a whole lot of drum instructors in Midland, Texas. I had what I played. I had what I heard from parents, from brother, from the world. And the unorthodox kind of playing, to be a little bit specific, comes out of my love. Me and Gergo share this, my love of singles, which when Tony Williams happened in my world, it was like, And I could intimate this stuff. I have many times and things. It's like instead of going dum, bach, all kinds of really cool, accurate, double stroke, compound sticking kind of playing, and I can mention players that do that. I'm like, bam. That's my thing. Sheets of sound, blurs over the bar line, and it all comes out of single stroke drumming in a lot of ways because it frees you to do that. And being from Midland, I had no other choice but to be organic. So those two things, where I'm from and how I feel about what I'm doing, you got to remember, man, the drum chair, if you're using all four limbs, you're animated. Some drummers are very stoic. I don't know how. It's all in their limbs, and it doesn't affect their greatness. But if you're playing drums, man, you're the time, you're the groove, you're what people are hearing to dance to. You're what some people see visually sometimes in Animal from I love that new Geico ad where they say we do have what do they say, we do have something in the attic, and Animal's just killing it, man. Something
an animal problem or an animal issue.
It really is. I've answered this my whole career. It really is just so beyond natural that I can't help it.
It's one thing to hear Kirk play drums, right? And I encourage all of you to go on YouTube. There's a million videos of him playing with Tribal Tech and everywhere else. You might even find some of me and Kirk playing.
Oh yeah. There's some cool stuff.
There's some cool stuff there.
Yeah.
But it's one thing to have him slay your mind, at the drum kit, and then all of a sudden he gets up from the drum kit and he goes over to the keyboard player's rig and he's, man, what if we did this? And he starts blowing out like he's Keith Jarrett or something. It's crazy.
Aspiring.
Man, no, man, you are you are obvious. Clearly you're a musical genius. And I'm not saying this isn't hyperbole, but I don't understand how you're so awesome at everything. And we're going to get to the singing too, but you got to talk about, like, where did the keyboard player start from? Because you play real jazz. Like, you don't stab chords, and like you can play hard, all the hard stuff, windows and giant steps and all these things, bebop, blazing tempos. Where the crap did that come from?
It's a very easy answer. And I have to say that people have very mistakenly said, "Oh, you're a multi-instrumentalist." No, I'm not even remotely. I am a percussionist. At 9 years old, I started banging the drums after my mom got tired of me destroying her utensil drawers. They got me a snare drum, a little blue sparkle snare drum with a cymbal. And then when I was 10, my older brother, Kyle, again, very close musically, talked my parents into getting me a drum set. And later he told me why. He said, look, if you're tired of him beating up the house, get him a set of drums. We'll put blankets on them. And so in a few short years, like by 12, 13 years old, we would go up to my aunt's house, my mom's sister in Utah, and she had a beautiful upright grand piano. I didn't know until decades later that real upright grand pianos have the same soundboard as a grand piano. It's just vertical. If you get one of those really old, beautiful, classic upright grands that's really super tall and lay it flat, it's a 6'3" grand piano.
Wow.
I went up there and I started jam bluesing, and I had other resources. A guy down the street from me, I'd play tennis, varsity tennis, and I'd go and jam at his house. He was like an older musical mentor. He had a beautiful grand piano. From 12, 13 years old, my focus was drums and piano.
So what, you just figured out how to play what you heard on the keyboard?
I used my ear. I listened. I finally got end of high school, like all of us. We had an offshoot of the choir, and the choir director taught a theory class for seniors. That was the Robert Ottman Purple Book. And I'll never forget this. I always mention this because I had a cool enough, and this is not some New York high school for the arts crap. These are just regular folks. But my choir director said one important thing that I've never forgotten. He said, look, all of this stuff you're having to learn about classical pedagogy and harmony and understanding is just the way the academics notated what they did. The French sixth, the Italian sixth, the German flat, the blah, blah, blah. And I went, okay, I'm in A flat in the key of C. This is the 5 chord in the key of C. I'm now in a new tonality. So I was already placing everything in a jazz reference, even as I was learning the regular classical stuff.
The vocal thing, I'm a late bloomer with respect to releases and stuff like that. I've been singing a long time, but you've been singing longer than I have. Was that a natural just evolution out of gigging and you found yourself needing to do it at some point? Or was this something you always did? I love that. First time I even knew you sang, this is funny to me now, but I didn't know you sang until I heard the Scott Henderson Dog Party album.
Right. The very first one.
Yeah. And you sang that whole album, and I remember looking at the credits going, what? It's just, that blew me away.
Hillbilly.
And now, you're leading your own, you've got an amazing, the Devil Horns project is, oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. You're leading that, obviously singing on that as well.
I love that question because, again, just like the drums and keyboards question, when I was about 10 and I was playing with my older guys' bands, which was very instrumental, because Kyle would always, like any older brother, he'd show me off. The way he would do it, he'd say, hey, guys, come here. And he'd say, play Wipeout. Again, singles.
Yeah.
I'd go singles. Never looked back. But I swear, in these early garage bands, practicing over at the church fellowship hall or whatever, 10, 12 years old, somebody had to sing. Now, my whole family was singers in the choir. We always had the church singing vibe. And I don't even remember knowing whether I even wanted to sing or could sing. But let me take you, baby, down to the riverbed. Someone had to sing I Got a Line. Yeah. Someone had to sing the Foghat tune.
Yep.
So before I knew it, I was singing lead almost earlier than keyboards.
Wow.
But again, those 3 things were the absolute focus: drums, keys, not in any order, vocals.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those guys. I'm not gifted with some kind of honey voice. Everything comes out my mouth. And I've been around those guys next to me on the stage, and I know what that is. But I want to sing in tune.
Yep.
I'm always cognizant of enunciation. And am I going more of a Frank vibe? Am I going more of a rock and roll vibe? Am I trying to be Blue-Eyed Soul? All these kinds of things. I'm sort of like, I guess, a kind of a craftsman practitioner.
Sure.
Not a natural born killer.
Singing is one of the hardest things I've ever done. That's a radical for anybody who's even tried to even just do a simple recording of themselves that sounds good.
Right.
You are opening up a can of worms of education that will never end. And
there's Stevie Wonder.
Oh my God.
There's Frank. And then there's the rest of us.
It's just singing in tune is so much harder than people realize.
It's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous, man.
And you mentioned
it's fun. Let me close my statement by saying I truly, genuinely love the hell out of it. I like singing. It's sometimes what helps me write these pop kind of tunes, because every now and then I get lucky and I'll sing a hook. Most of the times I'm coming from drums, keyboards, harmony, changes, some kind of little thing. But sometimes I get that vocal initiative.
Yeah.
So I love singing. And, I try to, I got a gig tonight, man. I take care of my voice. I get sleep. I take my nutrients. I do my thing because I want to sing good.
Yeah.
Plus I'm looking for my future ex-girlfriend. But anyway, so those are the 3 things pretty much in that order. And it really started because someone has to.
Yeah. Man, Joe Zawinul, you toured with, Allan Holdsworth. You got to tell us something about what it was like working with Zawinul, and Holdsworth for that matter. But where did that Where did that launch out of? Where's that connection? I never knew that story.
I guess chronologically, to add to the roots of where I came out of in high school and finally got to North Texas State, which, I showed up my first semester at North Texas State and went to the hall for lab band auditions, for drummer auditions, and there was 80 drummers lined up on both sides of the hall.
Wow.
For 9 bands. All but one of the bands had 2 drummers. So you're basically talking about 17 spots. And I had all these kids that had grown up with all this amazing marching band, drum line, stage band, private lessons, Greg coming out of Detroit and Michael Baker and all these cats. And I was Hillbilly Hank. but I was already a mature drummer as far as my drumming. Mm-hmm. Forget good or bad, just the way I played. I was in charge of the way I played by the time I showed up. A lot of cats were still in an evolution. They were still on their path. They were better readers, and I got that together real fast because you had to. But I was already, when it came down to just, I'm going to play in this band, and I'm the drummer. Shut up. I was already had that mindset and that mentality. So that helped me a lot. North Texas State is where I met everybody, the Willises and the Bisonettes and all my homies. And the first thing that happened before I left Texas was Condor back with Bert Ligon. Gary Willis was on bass, Jay Ford on sax, and Bert was writing great stuff. He wrote some killer pop jazz long before it was smooth jazz. And it wasn't ugly crap smooth jazz, elevator smooth jazz. It was cool Sanborn kind of funky, the Sanborn record, all those tunes. Yeah. Those are cool tunes. You can't sit there and go, oh, this is happy jazz.
Yeah.
No, it's just funky. It's funky soul jazz. Mm-hmm. Bert wrote a lot of that cool stuff as well as a lot of weather reporty kind of stuff. That was where those connections were made. By the time I got to LA, started doing tribal tech. And I have to insert the fact that my career is kind of hillbilly like my origins. I didn't come out to LA and do a bunch of 10 years of dues and playing with this guy and that guy and all these kinds of things. Willis got me the gig, started doing that. That led to the Zawinul gig. That led to the Holdsworth gig. I met Danny. We started Volto together. In other words, these things always happen as a stair step. As a cascading thing. But, all the while I was playing keys on the boat gigs. And for those who don't know, the boat gigs were not cruise liners. We were just floating around the harbors all over LA, playing pop gigs every night. Great bread. And I was doing this by then. I was singing and playing keys. And so I saw the balance. I'm out drumming with these crazy guys and doing cool things in town. I got called for these sight reading, these rehearsal bands down at the Old Union. And all of a sudden I'm playing with Bill Holman. Eventually I played with John DeVersa. That's a great story, man. DeVersa, I subbed on his gig for God dang it. Anyway, he doesn't believe in nomenclature. He doesn't believe in del segno, del capo, repeat signs, any of that. So every chart was 11 pages. And I still joke to this day, the first night I did the gig was the best I ever sounded because I was treed out like a monkey, man. Like you're going to state championships in football and tennis and you're like treed out. And I come away going, man, you got to take one semester of page turning.
Oh my gosh.
Especially if you only have one stand.
Oh, God.
You know what I'm saying? You're sitting there, you got to know how to do the accordion thing, and you're playing drums and watching the guy, and it's all hard-ass time. Mahavishnu meets Don Ellis. It's like, but these things all kind of happened, I think, in a musical chronology. One thing leads to another, one thing leads to another. And the first thing is you have to desire that. You have to want to be like us. I'm happy. You're happy when you're playing with Kenny. It's a great gig. He's an icon. Hopefully there's the main thing. There's cats on the band. But then you want to go the next night and play with Whitty and Carlock and, and Blow. and freak out, because to me, that's the balance. I literally did a gig with a guy out of Houston, John Glazer, who's in Tulsa now, was a sweetheart of enough to get me on this gig, even though his buddy from Tulsa was already on the drum chair. He said, do you think you could play bass?
Oh my God.
And it was like one of those things. I went, why, yes, I can.
How hard can it be?
I went down to Charlie's on Harry Hines and bought a $250 P bass. And I started playing bass guitar on this gig. Neil Diamond, Elvis Presley.
You just bought a bass and started playing
bought a bass. Now, I had an ARP Odyssey that the ARP Custom Engineering Group in Boston retrofitted with Gate, CV, and the other of the three back before MIDI, so that I could control the sequential circuits sequencer, which is a little black. It was like the guts of the Prophet from my Odyssey. So way back in the day, I could play a synth bass. Now that was home. I was comfy doing that, right? Yeah. But then I'd pick up that bass, and all of a sudden I got to clip my fingernails. And all of a sudden I got shit on the end of my fingers. And all of a sudden round wounds, pickups. Here's the funny part. I got to the point. This is a year, man. I toured with this band, regional touring. I was at a motel in Houston, Texas on the second floor, and I had taken all the frets out of my bass. And I was calling Willis all the time and saying, how do I epoxy the fretboard? And I'm going to put a jazz pickup back here, and I'm going to hubba. I wanted to turn this bass. And I got to the stage where you've ripped out all your frets and you're fixing to epoxy the fretboard or whatever the hell you guys do. And I just flipped out, and I forget who was there, but I got a witness. I took that bass sort of by right below the headstock, and I did, not the shot put, but the one where you spin and you throw the hammer, not the discus, but the hammer throw. I did about 3 spins, and I threw that thing about 150 feet out into the parking lot, and it shrapnel the thing, and I went, well, there's so much for my bass career. These things were of my own volition, just because I wanted to dig, man.
Oh my gosh!
You know how guys like me, Gergo. You ought to hear Gergo. He's a good bass player, but you ought to hear guys like, well, pick up your bass, your fretted bass, and go. It's
insane how many drummers can play bass great. I am.
Yeah, but that ain't this. I'm talking this.
I mean,
There goes an actual bass player, but. So this was my dabbling in multi-instruments. This was truly dabbling, and I just wanted to understand, like on a real level, what they go through.